Fifth Grade Magic by Beatrice Gormley. Copyright 1982. Chapter 4. The Fateful Haircut. Amy cut her hair! Beth dropped into her chair beside Gretchen, staring across the room. I know, said Gretchen, trying not to gape at Amy's cropped head. A thrill of excitement mixed with fright shortened her breath. Aurora wasn't a dream, and she wasn't a crazy lady on TV either. She had really worked magic with that thing she called an enchantulator. And what a thorough job Aurora had done. Gretchen had imagined Amy's hair cut to the middle of her neck, a little shorter than Gretchen's. But Aurora had chopped it off over her ears, well above the white collar of her plaid blouse. Gretchen felt a twinge of guilt. How could Amy stand to come to school with her beautiful long hair gone? The odd thing was that Amy didn't look upset. She was calmly taking out her pencils and her pencil sharpener. Trying to act as if nothing had happened, was she? Gretchen almost felt sorry for her. But had Amy worried about Gretchen's feelings when Mrs. Shepherd assigned parts for the play? No, she hadn't. So, too bad for her. Now Kathy was coming into the room, unslinging her backpack from her shoulders and stopping stock still. Amy! Kathy let her backpack plop down on Amy's table. You got your hair cut. Gretchen strained her ears. What would Amy answer? Amy looked up from her pencil sharpener, smiling. Hi, isn't it a nice cut? Mr. Jobbins did it. He's my mother's hairdresser. She shook her head. See how it falls back into place when I do that? And I won't have any more snarls. She made a face. I hated combing my hair when it was long. Gretchen could hardly believe her ears. Amy had cut her hair on purpose? Had Aurora cast a spell on her mind, too, to make her think that? For a moment, Kathy just stood looking at Amy. She opened her mouth and shut it without saying anything. Then, pulling a strand of her own dark hair over her shoulder, she nodded. Yeah, I hate snarls, too. She slid into her chair, gazing at Amy with her head on one side. That really is a nice cut. A lot of famous ice skaters wear their hair like that. What was going on? Gretchen, her eyes fixed on Amy's hair, seemed to see it change from hacked-off long hair to a shining golden cap, cut skillfully to the shape of Amy's head. Now Gretchen didn't know what to think. In a way, she was glad Amy wasn't upset. If Amy liked her haircut, then Gretchen hadn't done anything wrong. Maybe she had even done Amy a favor. But that wasn't the idea. On the other hand, it didn't matter whether Amy liked her haircut or not, as long as Mrs. Shepherd gave Gretchen her part in the play. That was the important thing about Aurora's spell. The table between Amy's and Gretchen's was full now, so that Gretchen couldn't see Amy very well. 3 or 4 girls clustered around Amy, chattering and smiling. A boy yelled, Wow, Amy got her hair cut. Hey, Dennis, she looks just like you. Gretchen's startled glance shot across the room to Dennis Boyd. Amy looked like Dennis? His blond forelock fell across his eyes as he wrestled with one of the boys at his table. His plaid flannel shirt tail hung outside his pants. Good morning, people. Mrs. Shepherd's heels clicked as she hurried into the room. In an instant, Dennis was in his seat with his hands folded, an angelic expression on his face. What do you know, thought Gretchen. Now he does sort of look like Amy. Mrs. Shepherd slipped her coat off and picked up the attendance book. And what a beautiful morning. My crocuses are blooming. Are anyone else's? Why, Amy! Letting the attendance book fall to her desk, the teacher leaned forward on her fingertips. Your hair. Amy smiled at Mrs. Shepherd, touching the back of her neck. I got it cut. My mother thought it would be a good idea. Your mother? Mrs. Shepherd looked puzzled, almost angry. But couldn't you have waited until after the play? Your long hair was just right for an old-fashioned heroine. I knew it, thought Gretchen. That's why Mrs. Shepherd picked Amy for Polly Winsome, because of her hair. I'm sorry, Mrs. Shepherd, said Amy. I guess Mother didn't think of that. Mrs. Shepherd looked as if she wanted to say something more, but then she shut her mouth and marched to the closet to hang up her coat. Watching her, Gretchen felt hope rising in her chest. Mrs. Shepherd seemed really annoyed. Hadn't Aurora said that cutting Amy's hair would break her power over the teacher, and that the teacher would take the heroine's part away from Amy and give it to Gretchen? Maybe this afternoon, when they read the play. Today was class picture day. Before lunch, Mrs. Shepherd lined the class up by twos and marched them down the stairs toward the gym, where the photographer was taking the pictures. Dennis and another boy were behind Gretchen and Beth in line. Glancing back at Dennis, Beth pulled her braids forward and held them under her chin, out of harm's way. Shh, said Mrs. Shepherd as 26 pairs of feet clattered on the stairs. Other classes are trying to work. She darted up and down the line. Quiet feet and mouths, people. Other classes are trying to work. They can't hear themselves think anyway with all that racket you're making. Dennis's voice wasn't quite loud enough for the teacher to hear, but his remark set off giggles up and down the line. Mrs. Shepherd hurried up the stairs. Shh, she bent toward them, frowning. Other classes are trying to work. When the teacher had gone back to the front of the line, Gretchen turned to grin at Dennis. She liked him, even if he wasn't a wise guy and a nuisance. In the gym, the photographer spent several minutes arranging the children in 3 rows. The first row sat on folding chairs, the second row stood behind them on the floor, and the third row stood on chairs behind the second row. Gretchen and Beth were ordered to the end of the third row. And the blonde twins in the middle, said the photographer. Blonde twins? Gretchen stretched her neck to see where he was pointing. There weren't any twins in Mrs. Shepherd's class. But then she caught sight of the backs of 2 cropped blonde heads. He means Amy and Dennis, Beth giggled. He thinks they're twins. The gym echoed with laughter and comments. All right, you aren't twins, said the photographer impatiently. Just stand together in the middle row. He squinted through his camera. No way, shouted Dennis, jumping into the back row. The metal chairs clanged. Dennis, said Mrs. Shepherd, please don't hold us up. Never mind, said the photographer. It was just an idea. All right, young lady, the blonde girl, you stand in the middle by yourself. Obediently, Amy wiggled through the other children to her place behind the first row of chairs. What a close call, Dennis muttered. I was almost a twin. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Shepherd passed out the scripts for the play. Miss Degrassi asked me to have you read it through once before she starts working with you. Those of you who are not actors or understudies may go to the library for free reading time. Quietly. Gretchen took a script, sitting up straighter. Surely now Aurora's magic would work, and Mrs. Shepherd would give Gretchen the part of Polly Winsome. When Amy started reading, it would dawn on Mrs. Shepherd that she was all wrong for the part. First, the teacher had them write their names on the script and mark their own lines with the highlighter. Underlining Polly Winsome's lines in yellow, Gretchen felt a glow of satisfaction. Polly had more lines than any of the other characters. It was clear she was the star. Then they started reading the play. Beth read Winnie Winsome's lines since the girl playing the mother was in Miss Degrassi's class. Gretchen sat silently, watching Mrs. Shepherd every time Amy spoke for Polly Winsome. Amy read without stumbling, but there wasn't any expression in her voice. She might as well have been reading a math problem. Surely Mrs. Shepherd would notice that. Maybe she would ask Gretchen to read Polly Winsome's part for a while. Then she would see how much better Gretchen could play the part. The script reading dragged on to Cadman Blackheart's first entrance. How fortunate that Mama and I are able to earn a modest income from the tasty pies we bake, read Amy. Otherwise, we could never pay Mr. Blackheart, the banker, the mortgage installments on our humble but cozy home. Gretchen's attention had wandered. She was wondering again whether she had imagined Aurora after all. Or maybe Aurora was real, but she was a post office clerk gone crazy. Maybe it was just a coincidence that Amy's mother had decided to take her to get her hair cut yesterday afternoon. Someone's not paying attention, said Mrs. Shepherd sharply. Gretchen's head jerked up, but the teacher was frowning across the room at Dennis. He was entertaining his friends by poking his nose and sticking out his tongue, as if his nose were a button that operated his tongue. That's your cue, Captain Blackheart. Dennis looked blankly up at the teacher, then down at the script. He began flipping pages. He doesn't even want to be in the play, thought Gretchen. Why did Mrs. Shepherd give him the part? Maybe to punish him. With help from the boy next to him, Dennis found his place. Aha, my pretty, he mumbled. Try to speak up, Dennis, said Mrs. Shepherd. When we put on the play, we want everyone in the back of the gym to hear us. Aha, bellowed Dennis. Your normal voice will do. Her own voice tight with control, Mrs. Shepherd folded her arms. The reading droned on and on, letting her thoughts drift. Gretchen suddenly found her eyes focused on the clock. It was 2:45, almost the end of the school day. If Mrs. Shepherd was going to take Amy's part away and give it to Gretchen, she would have to do it pretty quick. I am so distressed, Amy was reading calmly. We have not sold one pie all week. Boo-hoo-hoo. Gretchen's eyes were glued to Mrs. Shepherd. Her heart raced. The teacher had to see it now. Distressed? Amy didn't even sound mildly worried. Her bad acting, together with the haircut, would make up the teacher's mind. Mrs. Shepherd glanced up from her copy of the script. What a nice, distinct tone, Amy. People, I want every one of you to speak as loudly and clearly as that for Miss Degrassi. Pushing her glasses up on her nose, the teacher looked at the clock. We won't have time to finish reading this play after all. But everyone take your scripts home and practice reading them out loud. You'll start meeting with Miss Degrassi tomorrow afternoon. The door of the classroom swung open. The boys and girls who had gone to the library were coming back. Gretchen's heart sank lower and lower. So that was that. Amy would play Polly Winsome, even without her long blonde hair, whether she said her lines like a robot or not. Gretchen looked out the window at the sunshine on the brownish lawn, at the branches stretching towards the blue sky. It all seemed gray to her. There had been no magic working in this day after all. Blinking back angry tears, Gretchen went to the coat closet to get her jacket. If she ever saw, or imagined she saw, Aurora again, she would give her a piece of her mind. Chapter 5. No Sympathy. Gretchen's mother picked her up from school, as she always did on ballet class days. After ballet, Mrs. Nichols made stops at the post office, the drugstore, and the A&P, while Gretchen stayed beside Jason's car seat and let him play with the zipper pull on her jacket. She also found a pussy willow catkin in her jacket pocket and tickled his chin with it. I appreciate your keeping him amused, darling. Gretchen's mother was stowing groceries in the back of the station wagon. He's so fussy this afternoon. He must be teething. By the time they turned in their driveway, the setting sun was glowing red in the clear sky behind the spruces. 5:45, said Mrs. Nichols, balancing Jason on her hip to open the back door. It was so sunny and light this afternoon, I didn't realize how late it was getting. Late? Gretchen frowned as she hung up her jacket. Was she late for something? Oh, Aurora had said she would reappear in Gretchen's room this afternoon. Of course, if Gretchen had just imagined Aurora, everything Aurora said was imaginary too. Her mother set Jason down on the kitchen floor, but he began to whimper, the kind of whimper that tended to change into a howl. Oh dear. Gretchen, would you feed Jason some cheese while I start dinner? Taking cheese from the refrigerator, Mrs. Nichols cut it into cubes. He must be starved. He didn't have any snack this afternoon. She unclamped the tray from Jason's high chair and hoisted him into it. Gretchen hadn't mind entertaining Jason in the car, but now something was urging her to run up to her room and check, just in case. Okay, I'll be right back. She edged toward the stairs. Gretchen! Her mother looked exasperated. Please look after Jason so I can fix dinner. I'm starved myself, aren't you? But, Gretchen bit her lip. She couldn't very well say, but my fairy godmother might be waiting for me upstairs. Her mother was now peeling an onion over the sink, head bent, as if the matter were settled. Gretchen couldn't think of an urgent-sounding excuse for going to her room. And she was hungry. Taking the saucer of cheese cubes from the counter, Gretchen popped a cube into her own mouth and held one out to Jason. Carefully, he pinched it between his thumb and finger, lifted it to his mouth, and swallowed it, looking steadily at Gretchen. Eee, he said, patting the tray. While Gretchen was lining up 3 more pieces of cheese for Jason on the high chair tray, she heard the garage door open and close. That was Daddy. Gretchen's spirits lifted. If he was in a good mood, she could get him to act out a scene with her. Let's see, she had to keep on feeding Jason, so she should pretend to be someone with a baby. She could be the queen in Rumpelstiltskin. Daddy could be the little man Rumpelstiltskin himself. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Her father walked in the back door, loosening his tie and dropping his briefcase beside the rocker. Hi, Joe, called Gretchen's mother. Drawing herself up regally, Gretchen lifted her chin and spoke in a haughty voice. The queen is feeding her royal child, so this is not a convenient time for her to talk to you, little man. If you come back tomorrow, I'm sure I can guess your name then. Mr. Nichols stopped, looking puzzled. Then a gleam appeared in his eyes. He walked slowly toward Gretchen and Jason, smiling a little. Gretchen tossed her head, trying to keep from smiling back. Daddy was in a good mood. Now he was thinking up something for Rumpelstiltskin to say. Stopping a few feet from Gretchen, Mr. Nichols put his hands on his hips. Queen, huh? He spoke out of the corner of his mouth. You're nothing but a miller's daughter to me, baby. If it wasn't for me, you'd be stitching up flour sacks right now, and don't forget it. The deal is, guess my name or hand over the kid, pronto. Gretchen put her arms protectively around Jason. No, Varlet, you shall not have my child. I can still guess your name. Is it Rip Van Winkle? Her father shook his head scornfully. Da, said Jason, leaning over his tray toward his father. Jason knows, said Mrs. Nichols, watching them from the stove. Clasping her hands, Gretchen, the queen, gazed up at the rafters. Is it rutabaga? You're way off base, sister, said Mr. Nichols. Fork over the kid. Well then, said Gretchen slyly, it must be Rumpelstiltskin. As his eyes widened and his mouth dropped open, she smothered a giggle. How did you find out? Snarled Daddy the gnome. I've been double-crossed. I'm gonna put my foot through the royal floor. But as he lifted one foot to stamp, Mrs. Nichols ran around the divider, waving a potholder. Please, darling, think of the carpenter's bill. We had to get a new hot water heater just last month. She grabbed his arm. Mr. Nichols pretended to wrestle with her. No, come on, it's in the script. I have to stamp my foot through the floor. Gretchen gave up trying not to laugh, and Jason crowed and rattled his tray. That's enough. Curtain, Mrs. Nichols chuckled, pushing Mr. Nichols away. Dinner time. You set the table, Gretchen, while I make the omelets. Opening the knives and forks drawer, Gretchen felt a tug in the direction of the stairs and remembered Aurora again. All right, she told herself, I will go check, right after dinner. In a short while they were sitting around the table eating their omelets. When's your class play coming up, Gretchen? Asked her father. You're going to be a star. Gretchen slowly put down her fork. The play. She felt the smile on her face fading. Oh yes, the play. Mrs. Nichols leaned toward Gretchen. I meant to ask you last night, and then I was so busy getting ready for the company I forgot about it. Did Mrs. Shepherd assign the parts yet? Gretchen looked at her father, then at her mother, then down at her plate. Yes. She was torn between not wanting to talk about it and wanting their sympathy. And what's your part? Asked Mr. Nichols. He buttered his roll. Nothing, that's what, burst out Gretchen. Mrs. Shepherd hates me. She picked Amy Satcher to be Polly Winsome, and she didn't give me any part at all. I'm just an understudy and a scenery manager. That means I'm supposed to paint cardboard scenery and make papier-mâché pies. Mr. Nichols shook his head, chewing slowly. I don't get it, Gretchen. You're a good actor. No, really, I'm not just saying that because I'm your father. This Amy Satcher must be ready for Broadway. Gretchen snorted. Oh, she's terrific. This is the way Amy acts. I am so distressed. Boo-hoo-hoo. She made her voice sound even more flat than Amy's had actually sounded. Mrs. Nichols put her hand on Gretchen's arm. I'm sorry, Gretchen. You must be terribly disappointed. Tears welled into Gretchen's eyes. She tried to speak around the lump at her throat. It's so mean of Mrs. Shepherd. I've been looking forward to the play all this time. I know, said her mother. The trouble is, I don't think Mrs. Shepherd knows that. She probably doesn't even know you can act. From what she told me at the February conference, you haven't... Mrs. Nichols hesitated, fiddling with her fork. Mrs. Shepherd seemed to think you were... I don't know. She didn't come right out and say it, but I think your attitude bothered her. She looked questioningly at Gretchen. Well, her attitude bothers me, exclaimed Gretchen. Why couldn't I get Miss Degrassi for a teacher instead of her? You should hear the way Mrs. Shepherd talks. She says, people... Gretchen pretended to push glasses up on her nose with one finger. People, every part in this play is important. She must think I'm so dumb I won't notice that Amy Satcher has the best part and I don't have any part at all. Her voice choked on the last words. Gretchen looked at her father for sympathy, but he was shaking his head again. Gretchen, Gretchen. All right, so you don't like Mrs. Sheepdog. He grinned at Gretchen, but she didn't smile back. Very well. You can't decide to get along with just the people you like. Where would I be if I tried to get along with only with the customers I liked? I'd lose half my sales and I'd be out on my ear. Oh dear, Mrs. Nichols sighed, tearing a piece of her roll into bits for Jason. I wish I'd paid more attention to the way things were going downhill between you and Mrs. Shepherd, Gretchen. Your father's right. If you can't get along with her, you're the one who's going to suffer. Gretchen's tears had dried up. So it was her fault, was it? Outraged, she stared from her mother to her father. She was supposed to get along with Mrs. Shepherd, no matter how unfair the teacher was. But of course they weren't going to go to Mrs. Shepherd and lecture her about getting along with Gretchen. I think maybe you were spoiled by always having teachers you liked up until this year, her father went on. Real life is tougher than that. And now she was spoiled. She was not going to sit there listening to their lectures a minute longer. Excuse me, she muttered, pushing back her chair. Aware of the silence at the table behind her, her mother and father would be exchanging their grown-up glances. Gretchen carried her half-eaten omelet to the kitchen counter and set the plate down sharply. Then she swung her leg over the baby gate and stamped upstairs. But before she reached the top of the stairs, Gretchen saw light on the carpet in the darkened hall. It was coming from her half-open bedroom door, as if someone were running a movie projector in her room. Gretchen had forgotten about Aurora. Chapter 6. A Tough Spell. Hours late! Aurora hitched up the waistband of her baggy drab blue skirt with an angry jerk. The agency closes at 5 o'clock, you know. What if Anton jumped unnoticed? I have no authorization to work after hours. I'm sorry, said Gretchen, shutting the door behind her. She felt suddenly cheerful, even though Aurora was upset with her. I couldn't come up here before now. Well, Aurora snorted, then seemed to decide to let it go. Never mind, this once. She held her enchantulator in front of her, thumb poised over a button. Let's record your debriefing, and then you may express your gratitude. Express her gratitude? Gretchen started to laugh. Please speak clearly for the record, said Aurora. You arrived at school this morning, and Amy was there with her hair cut, and nothing, said Gretchen. When we read the play, Mrs. Shepherd said Amy was doing fine. She didn't change the parts at all. She didn't, Aurora's voice trailed off. She stared at the enchantulator, fingering the keys. But the solution... Amy said her mother took her to have her hair cut, Gretchen went on. I don't think your enchantulator really did anything. You don't think... But this is the best enchantulator in the agency. It's my aunt... Then Aurora stopped, pulled herself up straight, and adjusted the visor of her cap. I see. Her tone was offended. You don't possess confidence in my ability to terminate situational obstacles. All right, you can solve your own problems. No, wait, said Gretchen. I didn't mean you couldn't help me. Couldn't you try something else? Aurora looked up at the ceiling, sucking in her plump cheeks. Well, maybe the termination of your situational obstacles can be implemented in some other way. She began to tap the keys of the enchantulator. Problem, a certain predisposition on the part of your teacher tending toward favorable outcomes for Amy and negative outcomes for you. No kidding, thought Gretchen. Solution. Aurora jabbed a key, and her face lit up. Initiate a transfer of personalities. She beamed at Gretchen. You see, if you were Amy, you'd be the one the teacher liked. You'd be the one starring in the play. Gretchen shook her head, frowning. That doesn't make any sense. If I were Amy, I wouldn't be me. Aurora sighed impatiently. Well, of course you wouldn't actually be Amy. You'd be yourself, except in Amy's body. Are the potentialities making themselves evident? Oh, Gretchen caught on. It would be like wearing a costume, a disguise. Like a gorilla suit, only it would be an Amy Satcher suit. Everyone would think I was Amy, even Mrs. Shepherd. Aurora nodded. Exactly. Now, in order to concretize this concept, I'll need the pictorial representation of Amy again, and one of you, too. Where was that picture of Amy? Gretchen found the newspaper clipping behind her dresser. Then she hesitated, struck by a thought. Will it hurt? Aurora looked insulted. My technique mastery has reached a high level of achievement. It is extremely unlikely that any degree of discomfort will be experienced. What about a picture of you? Gretchen pulled a school picture of herself from her desk drawer. Fine, said Aurora. Following this, we need a material object for the facilitation of the spell. That should work. She pointed to a cardboard photograph folder on Gretchen's desk with a picture of her Aunt Marianne. Take that picture out, then glue Amy's picture on one side and yours on the other. Gretchen got out the glue. Amy's black and white newspaper picture wrinkled damply as she pressed it on one side of the folder. Then Gretchen stuck her own picture in color opposite Amy's. With the pictures facing, she and Amy seemed to be smiling at each other, as if they were good friends. The idea gave Gretchen an odd feeling. Of course, she and Amy had never smiled at each other like that. That's quite satisfactory, said Aurora, examining the pictures. They'll make contact when the folder closes, which is the key factor. She pushed up her sleeves and held out the enchantulator. For purposes of personal safety, please vacate the immediate vicinity. What? Oh. Gretchen backed up to the door and leaned against it, studying Aurora with a frown. There was something strange about her, other than her drab blue suit and her calculator wand. Although she wasn't fat, her face was very round, and her hands were plump. And maybe fairy godmothers wore uniforms nowadays, but why didn't Aurora wear one that fit? And why did she talk part of the time like a normal person and part of the time in a pea-soup fog of words? Ha! Aurora grunted, banging at a key with her small, pudgy fist. What a tough spell! But it goes without saying, she added, glancing at Gretchen, that difficulties are surmounted in a competent manner by experienced fairy godmothers like me. There! Sparks sputtered from the edge of the enchantulator, then merged into a steady beam, spotlighting the cardboard photograph folder on Gretchen's desk. Aurora chanted, her voice rising at the end of the first and third lines. While physical attributes remain in position, personality components undergo a transfer, and a quasi-permanent state of exchange will ensue. Watching Aurora, Gretchen noticed that her eyes were opening wide, as if she were surprised, maybe dismayed. She held on to the enchantulator with both hands, her face red with effort. As Aurora pronounced the last word, the enchantulator made a fizzling noise and its light faded. Gretchen heard a soft slap from the desk. The cardboard folder was lying flat, closed. Aurora wiped her forehead with her baggy sleeve. I have to address myself to the matter of my departure. I'll come back on... When did you say the play was? May 7th, said Gretchen. Or is it May 8th? Then something struck her. Hey, nothing happened. She looked down at herself. I'm not in Amy's body. This is me. What did you expect? Snapped Aurora. That spell is of significant magnitude, so of course it won't reach peak effectiveness for a couple of hours. Meanwhile, it would be inadvisable for me to continue in the presently held location. And, I have to go now. Suddenly, Gretchen seemed to feel the spell working away inside her, like a ticking bomb. Wait! She pushed herself away from the door. What if something goes wrong before May? If I want to change back to myself? Aurora looked irritated. How could anything go wrong? I thought I made you cognizant of my technique mastery. But the spell is triggered by the position of the folder. If you want to reverse it, just open the folder. Is that adequate amplification? See you at a future point in time. Gretchen would have liked to go over the amplification again, but Aurora had disappeared. Gretchen sat down on her bed. Now she had to wait for the spell to take effect. As a matter of fact, she felt a little funny already. Her skin felt tight, as if she were getting too big for it. The inside of her head felt tight, too. Maybe she had just eaten too much for dinner. No, don't be silly. She hadn't even finished one helping. Standing up to look in the mirror, Gretchen turned sideways. She smoothed her striped jersey over her stomach. She didn't look any fatter. Her head looked the same, too. Same freckled face, same wavy, gingery hair. Maybe the magic would happen while Gretchen was asleep. She might as well get ready for bed. Gretchen undressed and put on her pajamas. The tight feeling was getting worse. Her head seemed to be inflating like a beach ball, and the skin all over her body felt thin and tender. There was a knock on the door. Gretchen? Mr. Nichols opened the door. Listen, I'm sorry you feel so bad about the play. It's not really... He stopped, looking hard at Gretchen. Good Lord, are you sick? You look strange. He stuck his head out the door and called downstairs. Linda, come take a look at Gretchen. Mrs. Nichols ran up the stairs. I don't think she has a fever, she said, feeling Gretchen's forehead. But she does look strange. Do you feel sick, darling? I don't know. Gretchen was getting scared. She didn't know what to say. Not the truth, certainly. I have sort of a headache. Mrs. Nichols straightened up, still looking at Gretchen with concern. I'll give you something for the headache. Maybe you're coming down with some bug. A few minutes later, Gretchen was alone in her dark bedroom, wide awake and afraid. There was nothing for her to do but lie here, feeling stranger and stranger. Now her ears were ringing from the pressure inside her head. Gretchen turned over on her side, carefully, because her skin felt as if it could pop open any moment, like a jam-full suitcase. What if Aurora hadn't cast the spell quite right? She hadn't given Gretchen any hint that she would feel like this. What if Aurora wasn't a kindly fairy godmother after all? For all Gretchen knew, Aurora could be someone entirely different. Maybe a crazy scientist experimenting on girls. She had seemed sort of crazy at the beginning, Gretchen remembered. Now Gretchen was so frightened that she wanted to jump up and run downstairs to her parents. But she was more afraid of what would happen if she made a sudden move. And anyway, what could Mom or Daddy do? Gretchen had to get Aurora to come back. Aurora, she called softly. Nothing happened, except the top of Gretchen's skull felt as if it was going to start jumping up and down like the lid on a boiling saucepan. Then Gretchen's eyes focused on the white photograph folder lying on the desk. Why hadn't she remembered? Aurora had told her how to reverse the spell, open the folder separating her picture from Amy's. Forgetting to be careful, Gretchen flung back the covers and swung her legs over the side of the bed. And then Gretchen felt something split. Now she tried to scream, but it was too late. She could feel herself slipping away, a grape spurting out of its skin. For an everlasting moment she hung in nothing, black, soundless emptiness. Then Gretchen felt a pillow underneath her head. The bursting feeling was gone. Her skin seemed to seal itself closed again, loose and comfortable. But she could hear herself drawing loud, rasping breaths. She clutched the bedclothes, grateful to be touching something. Slowly, Gretchen opened her eyes. On the other side of the room, the window framed a black branch. Pressing her cheek against the pillow, Gretchen let out a long sigh. Nothing had happened after all. She felt silly for having been so frightened. On the other hand, she was disappointed to go through all that for nothing. Since she hadn't changed places with Amy... Wait a minute. Gretchen sat up in bed, staring across the room at the branch outside the window. There wasn't any tree outside her bedroom window. Turning her head, she saw numbers glowing from the clock on the night table. That was a digital clock, but Gretchen's alarm clock had a round face. And her pajamas. She was now wearing a nightgown. In the dark, Gretchen fingered the ruffled cuffs at her wrists. Then her hands touched each other. These hands with small, slim fingers were not her hands. Half eagerly, half fearfully, Gretchen jumped out of bed. Fumbling, she found the light switch by the door and pushed it up. Light flooded the room. Gretchen blinked at the full-length mirror on the back of the closed bedroom door. Blinked at Amy Satcher's brown eyes. Drawing in her breath sharply, Gretchen put her hand to her mouth. So did the reflection. This time, Aurora's spell had worked.